Everybody having a good time? Is everybody over that freaky robot yet? You want me to stand on the red rug? Great. Lesson number 1, if you don't like how the world is designed, change it. My name is Mike Monteiro, and I come here from Mule Design in San Francisco. It is my honor and privilege to be talking to you today. And I come to you today bearing good news. I come to you with glorious news. I have been to the mountain. I have seen the future. I have seen a land covered in milk and honey, perfectly designed, using no more than 2 complementary typefaces, perfectly gridded off. I have seen a land where design has taken its rightful place alongside the suits of business and the hoodies of engineering. I have seen a land where our hard work has paid off. I have seen a land where those who advocated for the importance of good user experience and design can now cash the checks our mouths wrote long ago. I have seen a land where those who fought valiantly for the importance of user experience can take a deserved rest. I have seen a land where those who fought for a seat at the table can now take a seat at the table, a seat that was so long denied to them. We did it. We have convinced people that design is important. We have convinced people that design can be the difference between something failing and succeeding. So let's give ourselves a big round of applause. This is the golden age of design. And we are screwed. We are all screwed. Designers are screwed. The companies who hire designers are screwed. Most importantly, the people who use our products and services are screwed. And we are screwed for 2 reasons. One, we are screwed because we have created a demand for which there is little supply. We need more designers than we have, both available to us now and in the pipeline. And 2, we're digging that hole deeper every day because in our hour of need, we've started moving designers up the chain before they're ready. And they're not really sure how to integrate themselves into a process that they're being asked to define. So we can't find enough of them, and we don't know how to work with them anyway. That's the problem. That's a problem that we need to fix. And that's a problem that I'm confident we can fix because we are problem solvers by definition. So let's tackle this one piece at a time, starting with finding some designers. I was talking to a friend of mine not too long ago. He was in the position of having to find 500 designers by the end of the year. And I say to him, where are you going to find 500 good designers? And he says back to me, who said anything about good? I just need to find 500 of them. This is bulk buying design. And a lot of companies are hiring designers this way right now. Like sea monkeys. You hire 500, you see who survives, you flush the rest down the toilet, and then you talk your parents into ordering 500 more. And there's a couple of problems with the sea monkey method, though. One, this is a really shitty way to treat people. I hire designers. And when I hire them, I tell myself that I'm taking on the responsibility of helping them with their careers, as well as exchanging money for their labor. I feel responsible for helping my little sea monkeys get better at the thing that they do. And when you're just pouring 500 people into a fish tank for the sake of meeting your hiring quota, you just turned one problem into 500 problems. Because all of those people are going to be looking to you on how to do their jobs, on how to measure their success, not to mention figuring out how they should all be working together. And you can't help them because you've already moved on to finding your next batch of 500. So you're not going to be there to help them. But Mike, this stuff that you're talking about, us having to do with those 500 designers, isn't this the stuff that designers should have learned in design school? And you would hope so. You would hope that they teach this stuff in design school. But they don't. Now, design school is a great place. It teaches you how to work with people on projects. Unfortunately, all of those people are just like you. They're all designers. They all speak the same language that you do. They all care about the same stuff that you care about. And all the projects are make-believe. Design schools teach you about aesthetics. They teach you theory. They teach you how to work the tools. They teach you how to be a designer as long as everybody else in the world who you ever had to convince of anything you do is also a designer who cares about the same things that you care about. But very few of them teach you how to work. They don't teach you how to talk to clients. They don't teach you how to present your work. They don't teach you how to sell your work. They don't teach you how to craft an argument with a coworker or a client or an engineer or someone in marketing. They don't teach you how to tie business goals to the decisions you're making. And they don't teach you ethics. They don't teach you the skills that you're going to need to eventually pay off that giant pile of debt that you're accumulating by being there. And that is criminal. But some companies, there are companies out there that are beginning to understand this problem. They understand that when they hire 500 designers a year, what they are hiring is fresh meat that's still covered in fetal juice. Fresh meat that needs to be tenderized and seasoned and molded and taught those skills. Now, surely there is a quick moving, disruptive startup working on this problem, right? You bet there is. They're young, they're stealthy, they're disruptors. They're international business machines. I know, right? What? This is my friend Greg's story. Now, Greg works at IBM in Austin, Texas. Now, IBM, as you know, is gigantic. They have a set way of doing things, and for the most part, it's worked pretty well for them throughout the years. But when you think IBM, you don't necessarily think good design. You probably don't even think design. But even IBM realized that they needed to step up their design game to compete now. So they hired Greg, along with a few other people like Greg. Now, Greg is one of the best designers I know, and one of the most experienced designers I know. So what's a guy like Greg doing at IBM? Greg, or IBM, hired Greg to design designers. So what Greg does is he puts IBM's new designers through a 12-week process. A 12-week boot camp. They do 3 projects in those 12 weeks. They do 2 3-week projects, and they do 1 6-week project. And all of those projects are tied to problems that IBM is trying to solve, mostly how to keep IBM relevant. And along their way, they're taught things like how to present your work, how to make a case, how to look for business decisions and tie them to the decisions you're making. And they learn how IBM thinks. IBM is dealing with the shortage problem by training their own. They'll take those young kids that still need the training, and they'll put in the time and the effort to train them. They'll put in the seasoning. They augment their skill sets. They teach them how to succeed in an organization. And they give them the tools and the opportunities they need to advance within the company should they choose to stick around. This is a pretty good onboarding process, and it's one that's really starting to pay off dividends for them. Now, obviously, this is a kind of solution that takes time and money and patience. Now, maybe the IBMs and the Googles and the Apples, maybe they have this kind of time and money and patience, but not the smaller companies. Now, some of you people here may run some of those smaller companies, and you're thinking, holy shit, I cannot spare 12 weeks to train a designer. Now, that's understandable. And some of you may be those designers who were thrown into a job with no training. I want to help both of you today. Mostly, I want to make sure you two never meet. Because if you can't spare 12 weeks to train a designer, you have no business talking to a designer that needs 12 weeks of training. You are toxic to each other's success. And if I'm one of those companies that can't afford that kind of intense training, what am I supposed to do? And if I'm one of those designers just coming out of school, how do I know where I should work? I can solve this. Let me give you an example involving my mom. That's my mom. Right? She's nuts. All right. I'll take a picture of my mom and post it on Instagram and Facebook and shit. She'll be all happy. So my mom is a seamstress. My mom was born in a small town in Portugal, the kind of town that's been doing things the same way for like 1,000 years. So when my mom told my grandmother that she wanted to be a seamstress, my grandmother did what parents in that town had been doing for centuries. She took her daughter to the town seamstress. And the town seamstress took my mother on to be an apprentice. And my mom spent years learning her craft. That's right. Not just the measuring and the cutting and the sewing, but also the client handling, the billing. She learned how to do a P&L statement. She learned how to talk somebody out of a dress that wasn't right for them in a gracious way. Tell me if any of this sounds familiar or applicable to design. And eventually she rose to the top of the apprentice ranks, to the point where some of the customers coming in would ask for her specifically by name. At which point the seamstress pulled a bunch of cards out of her Rolodex and handed them to my mom and said, now it's time to go start your own company. And that's exactly what my mom did. This is the apprenticeship model, where someone skilled in the craft takes it upon themselves to teach it to people who need to be taught. They take it upon themselves to train the next generation in that craft. And if you're a young designer just starting out in your career, this is exactly the type of relationship that you should be looking for. Last year, a few designers and I, we started this publication called Dear Design Student. And the goal of the publication is to give advice to young kids and to old kids too. Being veterans in this field, we knew a lot of the stupid crap that you have to deal with every day, and we wanted to pass along some of the stuff that we had learned. We wanted to be there for some of the people coming up. We wanted to be good mentors to people. And one of the most popular questions that we get, what do I need to do to start my own studio? And the answer to that question is always, wait 10 years. That's a really unpopular answer to a very popular question, even when Morrissey is telling you. Unfortunately, it's true. If you are just starting out in your career, and I'm sure that you are very talented, but you have no idea how to do the job yet. You have no idea the things you don't know. You have a lot of learning to do, and the best thing that you can do is to learn that on somebody else's dime. Spend it on their money, not yours. Find someone who's been in this business a long time. Learn everything that you can from them. Find somebody who's a veteran at the thing that you're a novice at, and just listen. Old people like me and Avi. We love telling stories. Go listen to them, because in those stories, you are going to find the secret of being a designer. And while the technology behind how we do our job might change every few months, and the devices that we design for might change every few weeks, the core of what we do as designers hasn't changed in 2,000 years. There's still a lot you can learn from old people. Let me introduce you to Andy here. So Andy showed up at our studio about a year ago. As an intern. He was just getting out of design school, and he had one of the best portfolios I'd ever seen for a kid coming out of design school. And I asked him what he was learning in school. And he told me, the usual stuff. Learning how to use the tools. Learning how to choose type. Learning how to look like a designer. By the way, I'll tell you guys the same thing I told Andy when I hired him. You can wear this thing, but your work has to be 3 times as good as if you weren't wearing it. And those are good things to learn, to be sure. They're also about half of what you need to know to be a designer. So I told him, I said, Andy, if you come work for me, I can teach you the stuff that you didn't learn at school. I can teach you how to present your work. I can teach you how to explain decisions to clients. I can teach you which risks are worth taking. I can teach you how to design persuasive arguments. And I told him this would take time to do. And I asked him to give me 2 years to do it. And for the first year, Andy didn't lead any projects at all. He didn't present work. He didn't get to make a lot of decisions. But he watched other people do it. He watched other people do all of those things every day. And he'd come with me to client presentations, and he'd sit there and take notes. But the entire time he was watching. Now recently, Andy got to present work to a client. Work he had done. Good work. And we practiced ahead of time what he was going to say to a client. And he knew why saying those things were important. And he did great. He started off a little bit shaky, as we all do. You should get your phone. But he had a persuasive story going in. He knew exactly what he needed to do. And I watched as he slowly got his sea legs up under him, and you could see his confidence rising up. And he did great. But here's the best thing about Andy. He understood when he showed up at my studio that there were things he did not know. There were things he needed to learn. And that's not because he lacked confidence. On the contrary, that's because he was confident enough to admit that he needed to learn more than he had. And that takes confidence. Confidence is about being secure in what you know and secure enough to say that you need to know more, and being humble enough to learn the things that you don't. And I've also told Andy that the day he wants to leave, because everybody leaves, the day he wants to leave, I want him to tell me, and I'm going to help him find his next job, because my job is to help all my employees find their next jobs. You laugh, but it's true. So if you're a young designer, here's some more keynote animations for you guys. So if you're a young designer, this is exactly the type of situation that you should be looking for. And if you're an experienced designer, somebody who's been around the block for a while, you should be looking out for the Andys of the world. You should be looking for kids like this to train. You need to be helping to grow the next generation of designers. You need to be generous with everything you know. The history of design is a chain that spans time. And you are just a single link. And you need to find your replacement in that chain. And if you're a design studio, big or small, you need to help build the kind of environment where teaching is possible. So that's mentorship. We solve the problem of not having enough designers by mentoring them. And you can do this at big companies like Greg Story is doing at IBM. And you can do this at small studios like we're doing at Mule. This is a bet on the future. And I love working with, I love bringing in the Andys of the world, because like Andy showed up and I'd been working in Photoshop for 65 years. Who here remembers when Photoshop didn't have layers? Yeah, sad fucking days those were. And Andy shows up and he's like, that's dinosaur software. I use Sketch. And now we all use Sketch in the studio. And it was because he showed up with something new. So not only is he getting something out of it, I'm getting something out of it, because I'm being reinvigorated by all these new ideas that show up. But Mike, Why the hell should I go work for a crotchety old fart like you? When a startup is willing to pay me twice as much. And they have an awesome cafeteria. That's a great and fair question, by the way. You should get paid as much as you can for what you do. Let me ask you another question. How long are you in this for? Are you looking to have a long, successful career? How much better do you want to get at the thing that you do? How far up the ladder do you want to get as a designer? And I don't mean title-wise, screw that. I mean the kinds of problems that you get to solve. Because I've heard a million stories from a million designers who've been stuck in the startup minds. By the way, you can tell this isn't a Silicon Valley startup because there are women in it. So they go into the startup minds, and they go to a place where all of the designers have the same amount of experience. Maybe one of them will have been there 6 weeks longer than anybody else, which means he's making a little bit more money, has a little bit more options. And in a world where you have to watch your burn rate, he's the one who's getting laid off first, so he's not teaching you jack shit. Or maybe you go to a place where you're the only designer on staff, which means you're either getting tacked onto the marketing team or you're going to be the weirdo on the engineering team who everybody calls the creative. You're going to be making buttons and display ads the entire time you're there. And you won't have a voice, and you won't know how to get one. Because there's nobody to learn from, and your growth is stumped. Now, you might get better at doing the things that startup needs you to do, but you'll never get better at your craft. So you need to find a company where you can grow. And that mentor that we talked about earlier, they're going to be an invaluable resource in teaching you how to deal with all of those different difficult people that you're going to work with your entire life. And new companies are making this shit up as they go. This is not a criticism, by the way, this is a fact. And there's a certain level of excitement in that kind of make it all up as we go thing. But you, as a newly formed designer, you are still so busy trying to figure out life within your little 3-foot radius that you really don't have time for anybody else's bullshit and chaos right now because you're figuring out your thing. So before you go putting yourself into that chaotic situation, make sure you're the one who can hold their shit together when everything else goes to pot. That means somebody who has seen a lot. That means somebody who has been through these situations before. That means that you need to know what to do when something goes crazy. And that is not you yet. Now, am I telling you to avoid startups? No, not at all. I love startups. Great ideas come out of little startups. I want to encourage you to work there when you are ready. I need you to be ready to fight. I need you to be ready to advocate for good design. I need you to be ready to advocate for the well-being of your users. I am encouraging you to get the training that you need for the fight ahead of you. Now, I hate to tell you this, and this may come as a shock to some of you, but right now in the startup world, or at least the ones making the majority of the noise, they have their head up their ass and they don't realize it stinks. They are solving problems for the top 5% of the population. The guy from Facebook is looking at me real weird right now, by the way. Where can I take a nap during the workday is not a problem that was on the top 5 of things to solve. How do I get people to drive me around without having to pay them health insurance? We need designers with enough training to keep things like this from happening. How can I get poor people to do my chores? We need to be solving better problems. We need to fight. We need to learn how to design persuasive arguments to keep shit like this from seeing the light of day. We need to be the people in the room who says you can't put people's place of employment on their Tinder profiles. That's not funny, that's dangerous. We need to be the people who design the systems where shit like this is not tolerated. What are you laughing at? These are not easy fights to have. These are difficult fights to have, but they are necessary fights to have, and they are fights that you need to be trained to have. Who in this room knows Krav Maga, by the way? Sweet. These are the fights that you need to be training yourselves for. There was a time when we made websites. That is a really nice thing to think about right now, because now we are designing things that go in people's bodies. We are designing things that drive us around. We are designing things that will tell our parents if we're pregnant. And if we don't have the training to know that those are stupid things to be designing, then we are going to keep designing them, and we are going to build ourselves a world of shit. This is, indeed, a golden age of design, which means that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to make our presence felt. It's an opportunity to design the world the way it should work. A world where all of us have every opportunity to succeed. A world where those are doing well can help others who need it. This is an opportunity to discover your voice as designers, to use that voice. Design matters. And it's up to you to decide how you want to use that voice. Do you want to use it to keep making shit? Or do you want to use it to keep making frat boys rich? Or do you want to use it to help build a more just world? Do not play that game. As a newly minted designer, I want you to consider using your skills for the betterment of society. Go find some real problems to solve. We have enough of them. I have made you a cheat sheet. Solve this shit. Because make no mistake, the world is working exactly as it's designed to work. And if you want to change the way the world is working, you need to change who's designing it. Yeah. Now, if there's anybody here who runs a startup, that all might have been a little bit hard to hear. But in spite of all the bad examples that I just mentioned, I want to reassure you that I do believe in startups. I do believe in the entrepreneurial spirit. I do love the excitement. I do believe there is innovation that can come out of places like this, and the diversity is astounding. And I want them to succeed. And I am doing you a favor by telling these kids not to come work for you. Because for good ideas to succeed, design needs to be integrated into them from the beginning. There is no amount of design that can turn this chair into this chair. It is done. So I want you to hire designers. I want you to hire a lot of designers, but I want you to hire designers that can actually help you. That means that you need to be looking for designers who understand the business value of what they do, both to your investors, who can explain this business value to your investors, and to your engineering team. That means you need to be hiring designers who know what questions to ask. That means you need to be hiring the kind of designers who aren't afraid to throw a few elbows once in a while. That means you need a designer at the same level as your head of engineering, at the same level as your head of product, at the same level as the person in charge of business, all of them reporting to the most important person in the company, your customer. You need a designer who's been around the block a few times. Someone who knows how to integrate design into a company. These designers are out there. They're a little bit harder to find, but they are there. These designers are Andy from the future. When I am done with him, come get him. And if you have one designer in your company, you need to make sure that that person has two very important traits. One, you need to make sure that she's a good leader. And two, you need to make sure that she's a good teacher. She needs to be a good leader because she's bringing design into your company. She's going to have to sell it, not just to your users and your investor, but internally as well. And that may actually be the hardest part. And they're going to need your backup to do it. I guarantee that within 2 days of hiring your designer, somebody's going to come into your office and say, Barbara isn't letting us launch because she says the sign-up flow sucks. And your reply needs to be, that's why I hired Barbara. And if you hired right, you can trust that when Barbara says the sign-up flow sucks, it's because the sign-up flow sucks. And here's the really good news. You're also going to need this person to be a good teacher, because once your first experienced designer establishes a foothold of good design in your company and has started making design core to what you do, and you start becoming successful, then you can start bringing in some youngins for that designer to train. And that first designer then becomes a mentor, and you've got yourself an honest-to-goodness design practice. But building that kind of practice takes time. And doing that kind of nuanced bridge building and laying that kind of foundation needs to be done by somebody with experience. And if you put a kid in that position, you're not putting them in a position to succeed. You're putting them in a position to fail. And you're putting your company in a position to fail. Not to mention that you're destroying that kid's career. And I like you too much to let that happen. And I like design too much to let that happen. Now, whatever you choose to do in this glorious golden age of design, however you decide to handle this moment, I wish you luck. I commend you on being a designer at this glorious time when design is seen as a force for good and a force for change in the world. I implore you to rise to this challenge. And I hope that you take to the task with the respect and joy it deserves. I hope you do your work ethically, no robot crap, and honorably. I challenge you to do the work well and to look out for the people who need you to do your job. And I implore you to act quickly. This is indeed a golden age of design. This is an opportunity that doesn't come along for every generation. And I beg you not to waste it. Thank you.